Something a little bit different today. I'm coming to you from a box at Newbury Racecourse. We're on a team building day out here at IHM, but the work never stops. We've got a webinar to get out of the way first. So if you've got any tips for me today, please put them in the chat. They'll be gratefully received. Today we are going to be talking about the problems around delivering new inventory into the living sector, the challenges that people are facing in getting new developments out of the ground, and perhaps some of the solutions to getting things moving again. My name's George Sell. I'm editor of Urban Living News, and we're an online B2B platform for the living and flex workspace sectors. Today's webinar is going to last an hour. We're going to have around 45 to 50 minutes of Q&A with our panelists. We'd like to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for us, please submit them using either the Q&A or the chat. We'll either answer them there and then if it's on the topic we're discussing, or we'll save a bit of time at the end of the session. You will receive a link to a recording of the webinar over the next couple of days, and there'll also be a very quick survey at the end of the session. And we'd love to get your feedback to help us shape the next series of webinars to make sure that we are bringing you the topics that you want to hear about. So I just wanted to show you a couple of context slides. These are all screen grabs from stories that we've run recently on Urban Living News, just to give you a bit of background to the topic we're discussing today, and a kind of a bit of context to show some of the subjects that we'll be discussing today. So if you look at the top left here, this is a very recent story. This was only this week. The time it takes to get a planning consent in London for a build-to-rent scheme has nearly doubled over the last 6 years. The story to the right of that, Gateway 2 approval times are coming down. So it feels a bit like the planning system is giving with one hand and taking away with the other at the moment. As one element improves, another one worsens. So that's obviously a bit of a challenge. We've got the Renters' Rights Act coming into force in a couple of weeks. So the implications of that are going to be interesting. And there's a lot of investor demand to buy operational stock because the pipeline for new delivery beyond 2027 and 28 is looking thin, to put it mildly. It's quite a worrying situation. If we go on to the next slide, there are things to be excited about. There are some interesting things happening. Overall, living sector investment is going up. Investors are really interested in this sector. They want to deploy capital here if it's feasible. We've just seen the launch of the National Housing Bank. Obviously, it remains to be seen how that's going to play out, but that's potentially an interesting route for funding and kickstarting stalled schemes. Interestingly, we've seen the first sort of blockchain launch of tokenized sale of a build-to-rent asset, and that potentially, if it's done well and regulated properly, that opens up a whole new audience of potential investors in living sector assets that previously didn't have access. And finally, we're seeing a lot of interest in this new kind of mid to low rise build to rent, or garden style build to rent, whatever you want to call it. That's definitely something I think we're going to see a lot more of as it cuts out the need for the gateway process. So let's meet our panelists. Unfortunately, Bay has been held up, hoping he might join us, but we're going to crack on anyway. I'm
here, guys.
Oh, there you are. Good to see you, Bay. I didn't see you. Nice to see you. Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, so let's have some brief introductions, and we'll go from left to right as we see the slide there. So Max, first of all, good morning to you.
Morning, George, and morning everyone on the call. I think I worked out, George, it was 2.5 years ago that I joined the last one of these webinars, and I'm hoping the camera means that the audience can't pick up the grey hairs that have come on in that period, whether that's market related or being an Arsenal fan, to be debated. But great to be here. I'm Max Sugden. I'm VP at Telford Living in the development investment team. In layman's terms, that means I focus on all transactional matters from land acquisitions through to capitalising and the disposal of the scheme. Telford Living was set up in 2024, and it was an evolution really off the back of Telford Homes, who at that time had delivered about 15,000 units across 170 projects since it was established in 2000. And the shift really signified two key things for us as a business. One was really an evolution of the geographies and the tenure type that we were looking at. We went from what was very much a London-focused build-to-rent developer to one that is now a UK-wide living sector developer, picking up PBSA co-living alongside build-to-rent and an open market sale. And second of all, moving away from using our own construction arm as Telford Homes, working with best-in-class third-party general contractors. And we've been busy. It's been a busy start to the year. We've handed over 3 build-to-rent developments already for our partners at Legal & General and Ridgeback and Angelo Gordon. And we've submitted planning for a scheme in Bethnal Green for 520 beds. So plenty going on this end, plenty to come, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Max. Probably not a good time to reveal that I'm a Southampton fan. We'll gloss over that. Bronwyn, welcome to you.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. I'm Bronwyn Jones, Development Director at Greystar. So Greystar are a vertically integrated business, which means we invest, develop and operate. And we've got over 1.1 million homes under management globally. I'm on the development side of the business. So I lead on the delivery of our Pearl Yard development in Bermondsey. So that's delivering over 1,600 new homes all for rent on the site of the former biscuit factory, which some people might know the site as.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Bay, good morning to you.
Morning, and thanks for having me, and nice to see you and meet you, everyone. So Bay Downing, I'm the joint CEO of Downing. We are a family business, and we've specialised in developing and operating residential living for the last 40 years. I think we're the longest standing PBSA provider in the UK. We've built just under 16,000 beds across our timeline, and now a vertically integrated investment manager, developer and operator of residential living across the UK.
Thank you, Bay. And finally, Nigel, good morning to you.
Morning all. Nigel Jones, Development Director at Abodus. We're a student living developer, operator, vertically integrated platform. Seems to be the key word from everyone these days. So we've got about 5,500 student beds across the country. We're actively buying more trading assets at the moment. Every week we're looking at different things that are coming to the market. We're not currently developing anything. I'm finishing off 2 reclad jobs, adding value to previously bought assets. So working with the regulator, looking at prices all the time of construction. So looking forward to a good discussion today.
Thank you, Nigel. You will be able to see the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers in the chat. So if you want to carry on the conversation with them and connect with them afterwards, then please do so. Okay, let's crack on. It's timely to mention the Renters' Rights Act. It comes into effect next month. I'm just wondering, is that obviously the main impact of that will be on operations, but is it impacting underwriting for living sector schemes? Bronwyn, would you like to pick up on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing to say is that kind of as a business, we have been preparing for this for some time. So we can kind of feel ready for the implementation on the 1st of May. Much of what the reforms introduce actually reflects practices that were already embedded in our kind of management approach. So whilst it is a significant change for the market, we don't feel like it fundamentally changes kind of how we operate. On the underwriting side, I think the key focus has been perhaps the move to the kind of assured periodic tenancies, so abolishment of fixed terms. That obviously changes the revenue and occupancy predictability to some degree. So I think what we're seeing more questions from lenders, from valuers, focusing on those kind of void assumptions, turnover modelling. I actually think that the kind of more the larger question also might be around rental growth rather than the tenant structure and how that works with rental increases and the kind of tribunal process that the tenants could take through. So I think as the market adjusts, I think we'll obviously be paying close attention to how that operates in practice. I think we also are expecting some short-term disruption, particularly around the transition of the existing student tenancies into rolling contracts ahead of the summer. So obviously peak student demand. But overall, I think we're confident that the market will adapt quickly, and actually we kind of welcome the changes as supporting a more kind of resilient rental sector over the long term.
Yeah, I think if you offer a great customer experience, then you know, by and large, you're going to come through this well, because people aren't going to want to be moving all the time. You know, it's a pain to move. I think the unknown is how well resourced the adjudicator will be, because you know we can be pretty sure that everybody will appeal the rent increases, and if that takes a long time to deal with, then you know that does affect the financial calculations for a development. Bay, is that something that you're having to consider around your schemes? What are your predictions for the implications of the Act?
Yeah, I think we're not as impacted in our sort of student side, obviously under the ANIC code and operationally there. But I think from a co-living perspective, it just puts a big administrative burden on the sort of sales admin teams that previously wouldn't have been there. Obviously, with tenants now being able to say that they give a 2-month period in which they want to move out, that's where the sort of turnover and problems will start to arise, especially for those sort of BTR and co-living developers who do have a big portion of students in their assets. We believe that there'll be a portion of them undergrad students who might finish their courses earlier than the postgraduate students, where they'll be trying to enforce some of those rules in their favour. That's obviously yet to be determined and to play out. But ultimately, if you're providing a great living experience and people naturally want to stay there, they should stay unless they have to move, or whether they're a student or not.
Yeah, thank you, Bay. Let's move on and talk about Gateway 2 then, because we mentioned earlier before the call started, anecdotally, I'm hearing that things are getting better, things are going in the right direction. Nigel, did you want to share some of your experience on that?
Yeah, so I'm currently finishing a reclad job in Newcastle. We're submitting Gateway 3 at the moment. Gateway 2 was painful to get started on site. I'm just as a sort of caveat, I'm all in favour of safety, but I think the way they've gone about it is slightly wrong. They're slowing safety of buildings down rather than helping people get work done quickly. But my relationship with the regulator now is fantastic. I've actually got a mobile number for a regulator. This is the second regulatory lead we've got on this job. We email, we have calls together. How would you like this presented? This is what we're going to do. Does that fit with you? And we're having meaningful conversations, because actually, if we present it in the way we think, we want to present it, but that's not what they want. It's going to slow it down. We want to make their job as easy as possible, so we get a result quicker. We did get a major change through Gateway 2 to allow student occupation. It was sort of quite a technical point, and even the regulator didn't understand the technical point we were going after. So it was painful at the time, and we were leading the regulator at that time. So they have admitted a number of times they're not sure what to do, and they've got to take advice. So if it's slightly the blind leading the blind, but everyone is it's quite a professional operation, but they don't have the answer straight away. We've got investors asking us the questions, what's happening with this? And actually, it makes us as a professional team look slightly poor because we can't answer it. Even our advisors can't answer it, but then the regulator can't answer it as well. So it doesn't help when we're talking about such large sums of money and trying to get schemes over the line in a safe way, that we just need a piece of paper signed off. I think it would be better if building inspectors came and inspected on site rather than just sitting back a lot of the time. That's the change that needed to be made, but it's not my soapbox to change the process now. But it is improving, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Nigel. Max, what's your experience of the BSR, and is it going the right way?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, agree with what Nigel said. I think with any new form of regulation, it takes time to work through it for the market to work with this. In this case, the regulator, we're going to see it on the Renters' Right, and there's going to be a period of adjustment. Bronwyn talking about, that short term position and trying to work through it. We're definitely seeing improvement. The engagement is got a lot better. Timings have come in undoubtedly. So, in that respect, it's positive. We've got our remediation side of the Telford Homes business working through a lot of cases, as well as us looking at Telford Living, newer developments, and we've got slightly different experiences across the two, if truth be told. And some good examples and some not so good examples. So I think there's still a little bit of a way to go, but we certainly welcome the shortening of the time periods. If you talk about planning doubling the last 6 years, as you alluded to, at least it's welcome that you can try and recover some of that pre-vertical phase through quicker gateway to application. So trending in the right direction, we think.
Yeah.
I mean, can I just add to that? I'd actually say, from our point of view, it's like it's the complete opposite, really, from what we think should be happening. We've only got a small sample size, but like 2 assets, one in Leeds and one in Newcastle, which we're going through. We recently got rejected for the second time in Leeds on the basis of information that was approved on our scheme in Newcastle. So 2 different cities do the same information submitted. One's approved and one hasn't been approved, and it's like that sort of inconsistency there and the sort of drag on the timescales, and from an investment point of view, it's just creating this burden that previously obviously wasn't there, and in turn it's just going to stifle investment into development. And I think it has to be raised that, like, although we have to hold the councils to account, that it's going to stifle investment, and these assets aren't going to get delivered in the timescales that they require, that the government requires.
Yeah, I think it's like you alluded to earlier, Nigel. It's as with planning in general, it varies quite a lot according to where you are in the country, unfortunately.
Especially
Max,
with the student scheme, it's very hard because you have a date to hit. If you don't hit that September date, generally, there's other bites of the cherry occasionally, but generally it's a September intake, and you miss that, you've missed a year. So there's schemes that are now PCing in February, so that then they can then apply for Gateway 3, which then means you're starting 6 months earlier on site, and you're having hold costs longer and no income coming in. So the cost of the development just goes up. The cost of building is exceptionally high at the moment. To then have an extra cost on top of that doesn't help get the developments underway.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% echo that. I think for an IRR-driven investor like ourselves at Greystar, and I'm sure the others on the panel, I think the viability of a project is hugely impacted by the time taken to not only get on site, but then also get the homes operational at the end. So both Gateway 2 and Gateway 3. And I think while there's still uncertainty on the timescales, and while schemes aren't going through in the statutory timescales, there's still going to be added risk. And I think at the moment that just isn't being matched by increased returns because of all the other viability constraints in the industry. So I think just as a kind of example, so obviously my project on Bermondsey, we are progressing under the transitional arrangement. So we started on site before the BSR requirements came into effect. So we're not subject to the gateway process. So we had that kind of more certainty on timescales. I genuinely think that if we had gone through the gateway process, we would potentially be sat here with still an empty site, versus having already delivered 170 homes with kind of a further 300 to be delivered this year. So I think that difference that it can make to the viability of that scheme with that timescales is massive.
Yeah, thank you, Bronwyn. Max, the building safety levy is coming into force in October. How are you factoring the cost of that into your viability assessments? And have you kind of comfortable with where that's actually going to be?
I think the guidance is pretty clear in terms of the cost allowances you need to include depending on the borough and the previous use of the site. If we take our Bethnal Green example I mentioned earlier, a 520 bed student scheme which we submitted for planning at the start of the year, we think the cost there is just over £500,000 for the levy, which I think if you take in isolation against the total development cost, it is not necessarily material in itself. But I think when you add in some of the costs that are related to, the gateway process, other building safety matters, and then the time that, the other panel members have already alluded to, the overall impact there is material. The cumulative effect of these things does make a difference. We've estimated the impact on a levied IRR basis is between 25 and 50 bips for a project, when you're just taking into account the gateway and the levy cost together in a market which is viability is already incredibly challenging, and you're trying to hit returns for investors of kind of value add plus returns. 50 bips, 25 bips is big difference. So whether there's some betterment in 106 requirements, we know what's happening with SIL under the emergency measures in the short term, that everyone knows where viability is. So, but in terms of levy, at the moment we're just including that as an additional cost item.
Yeah. Bay, does Max's experience tally with what you're going through?
Yeah, I mean, the same similar thing to Max. Really, we just built the cost into our underwrite accordingly, and then obviously the program's like imperative to seeking that gateway 2 approval in advance of the October deadline. So yeah, there's similar scenarios there.
Yeah, thank you. Nigel, you mentioned that the cost of development and cost of construction is extremely high at the moment. Has it gone up significantly since things kicked off in the Middle East in the last few weeks? Have you noticed a difference in that timescale?
Haven't costed anything in the last few weeks, but it was over what's the term I'm looking for? It was overly expensive before the Middle East crisis. So it's only going one way, isn't it? It's not going to come down at the moment. So very hard to build because, especially in the student side, the rents aren't increasing at the same rate as Bronwyn said earlier. The cost to build is just prohibitively high compared to where it was a few years ago. And that's why we're looking at buying trading assets, because a block that was built 5-10 years ago was built much, much cheaper than you can build now, probably half the price that you can build now. So
yeah. So and Bronwyn, on your scheme, which is a multi-phase, multi-building development, presumably you've seen the cost of construction going up constantly during the time you've been on site.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we entered into fixed price contracts, but clearly from the first point of acquiring the site to starting on site, there it was in a period of significant cost inflation. So yeah, it's just another kind of stick in that viability stack, which makes these developments challenging. But yeah, look, I think the construction cost volatility is definitely a concern, but I think, to be honest, the wider viability piece is just one piece of that. So everything we've been talking about so far, planning delays, Gateway 2, building safety levy, fundamentally it's just making that kind of gap between return and risk even wider. So that's really the kind of key challenge at the moment.
Yeah. We've painted a pretty negative picture so far, but let's talk about a few of the things that the government is trying to do to improve things a bit, and whether we think they will help. Max, if I can start with you, the kind of default position to give planning consent for brownfield sites and land near railway stations, is that going to have a material effect? Is that going to make sites viable for you that weren't previously?
Well, look, I think it's certainly helpful and it's welcomed, and I think we've seen a willingness from the government to intervene more into making sure new developments can come forward, whether that's through bodies like the GLA calling in sites, across the living sector, whether that's the Secretary of State through appeal decisions. There has been a positive movement there. Probably more to be done, it's fair to say, but we're seeing again that trending in the right direction. For me, the biggest challenge on planning, or one of the biggest challenges, comes back to a cost and time matter, right? So I go back to Bethnal Green again. We submitted 48 reports with that planning submission in January. You can work out in a number of consultants engaged in that, the time and the cost of doing it. And all that means for us as a developer is the entry price for an investor down the line, in theory, increases as we seek to recover that cost and a return on that spend and time that's gone into it. Whether or not we can get it or not is to be negotiated. But when we talk about viability again, I think there needs to be a simplified process of what needs to go into, in that instance, a single phase, single tenure scheme. We're not talking about large master plan, multi-phase, multi-tenure scheme. So look, planning positive where there's a clear outcome, of course, but I think there's a lot more that can be done on the planning system without trying to be too negative, and you bringing back some positivity, George.
Yeah. A slight diversion from the agenda, but I'm interested to know if you're seeing any impact of AI yet in terms of the kind of the bureaucratic and the reporting side of development. Are there tools out there that are speeding up the process there? I mean, I know the government is planning to digitize the government is planning to digitize the whole planning system, but is there anything that you are doing in-house with AI that's speeding things up?
We're exploring a lot of options. We actually had this debate the other day about the 48 reports and how the council reviews all of those, given they're very specialist in some of their natures, and come back in the timescales that they set themselves to return. I'm not sure how far progressed they are on. Suspect perhaps not particularly so. We are trying to find ways to simplify the process for them and to make sure those timescales are improved. And AI absolutely is a route to do that. But I think we're probably still, from our perspective, in the exploration phase of the best way to do that, and trying to get our heads around all the various different ways that we can use AI.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to chip in on that? Anyone else doing anything interesting with AI?
I think the grades are similar. I think exploration phase of how we can use it to assist. We're starting to use it in more in the kind of design process actually as well, just to speed up kind of testing new site opportunities rather than having to go through kind of weeks and weeks of feasibility studies to be able to run an initial underwrite using kind of software which can plug in our kind of default build typologies and generate a scheme kind of much quicker. That's one of the main focuses for us at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn.
Certainly helps with the design phase from an M&E side, especially class detection and things like that, where they can run the systems much quicker and you can get reports out better and quicker. So they also, from running what schemes have got consent, why, and the different clauses. The AI can just search the documents a lot quicker than any of us can. So it can speed up the process.
Yeah. Bay, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, we're using it in a few different areas. I mean, we've got like using a company called Findable AI that's helping us with like our M&A documentation and handover process. We're using Claude for a lot of like in our investment analysis and helping us sort of with underwriting and comparables. And then from an operational side, we've got Veriflow AI that are helping us with our like lead generation and inbound and outbound campaigns that are automating like sales and qualification processes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let's talk a bit about the lending landscape. Obviously, we've discussed all the challenges involved in developing new inventory and the increasing costs. How is that affecting lenders' appetite to be active in this sector? Max, you want to kick off on that one?
Look, I think the lending market, it remains, active in terms of their desire to be lending across the living sector. When we're out there talking to our key lending partners, and there's a huge desire for them to find ways to be working alongside us. Unfortunately, there's only so much they can do given the overall geopolitical and macro position in terms of being able to help with the viability position. So, demand, I think, remains there. I think, the National Housing Bank is certainly welcomed, and we look forward to exploring again how that can work, with Homes England umbrella alongside it. There's a significant amount of money that's been allocated to that. Exactly how the products can benefit and the devil in the detail behind everything, needs to be explored. And I mentioned we're speaking to Homes England actively at the moment in regards to that. So it's certainly positive and welcome, but we need to get into detail of what that looks like before we can truly understand whether that can really accelerate and unlock, those sites that have been stalled for some time.
Yeah. We were actually talking to some lenders yesterday who said that they're now comfortable with lending on schemes before they've got Gateway 2 approval, which is a relatively new development. Is that something that tallies with your experience, Max?
It is. I think there has been a shift there, and I think it ties back to the experience that the market's having with Gateway 2 and the increased confidence. There are still the examples that Bay talked about earlier, which are unhelpful, but I think lenders are trying to be creative on how they can come in earlier on the journey and maybe splitting up the lending offerings that they can do from post Gateway 2 and structuring some sort of bridging financing in between or something that's slightly more creative. So yeah, as I say, there's certainly demand from that space, and we hope that continues.
Yeah, okay. While we're on the subject of the BSL, we've got a question here from Marcus Weeks. Marcus asks, do we think that the BSL will be ready for the large influx of PBSA Gateway 3 applications at one point in the year? This could leave developers unable to occupy going into an academic year. It kind of circles back a bit on your point, Nigel. Do you want to take that one?
If it's a yes/no answer, the answer's no. But part of my discussion with the regulator has been we're going to be finishing at this date. We're going to be submitting on this date. These are the documents you're going to have, so that they can resource appropriately. So that, and the problem is the regulator can just say we need an extension. It's meant to be a mutual extension, but as the client, you have no say. There's nowhere else you can go. You have to just say, yes, you can have another 12 weeks, which sometimes is all right. But if you're trying to get occupation in September, it's not acceptable. But you have nowhere else to go. So it's very hard. And this is why some student-ready developers are PCing in February or something to give them more time. But then you need to have started earlier because the BSR need to have given you Gateway 2 initially to get on site earlier rather than having 6 month downtime at the start of the project. So Is it going to happen? I can't see it, but I think there just needs to be more dialogue along the process, really.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nigel. Other than Telford, you guys are all kind of integrated operators and developers. Bronwyn, do you think this is going to be the mainstream model now in the living sector? And does it make attracting investment and lending easier if you are in control of the operating platform as well as the assets?
I mean, yes, meaningfully so. I would say. I think we as Greystar, we're still seeing a huge amount of interest from kind of capital and lenders wanting to work with us, and I think a big part of that is the fact that we're vertically integrated. I think operational for the build to rent and student sectors, I think operational income is becoming a kind of increasing focus of the whole underwriting process. And I think previously as it being quite a theoretical underwriting input to now kind of funders, lenders, they want to see that they want to see the data, they want to see that actually demonstrated through live portfolio performance. So whether that's occupancy rates, rent collection, kind of resident satisfaction, tenant profiles, all of that. And I think that's now a central part of the kind of DD conversation, whereas it perhaps wasn't a few years ago. So I think, like I said at the beginning, Greystar, we manage over 1.1 homes globally. So I think we have a massive data pool that we can draw on, whether that's stabilization periods or kind of plotting out those kind of downside scenarios, for example. So that puts us in a really unique position compared to a kind of more pure play developer who are focusing more on kind of third party management agreements. So I think that type of institutional grade experience and kind of transparency is where kind of debt markets are really interested at the moment. I think that's why we see so much demand. So I think funders, lenders, they're increasingly looking for operating partners with that scale and with that consistency. So I think that vertically integrated piece, having that operational data, having that operational experience in-house is a huge strength of ours and something that we see kind of being key to kind of continuing our growth in the sector.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Bay, does that tally with your experience as an integrated outfit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've obviously have a long track record and a defined exit route of and deliver a track record of delivering in accordance with what we've underwritten and what we've told the lenders and investors that we do over several decades. So it definitely helps having that sort of integrated piece, especially from, I think where we're moving now is into more sort of a data-driven environment where investors want data on they're getting a lot more ingrained into the detail, and by having that sort of vertical integration, you're able to provide that in a lot sort of faster period of time when they have queries or questions. And obviously the track record of delivery gives confidence to investors that they're and probably de-risk their investment into us. So there's definitely areas across the business, and I think that's where the sector will be, the living sector will be heading, by having that vertical integration and having specialists who do day in, day out and deliver for their investors.
Yeah, thanks, Bay. And Max, to flip that question on its head, would you consider launching an operating platform, or are you still very much committed to your current model?
To be honest, I don't think so, George. It's something we've debated previously, but I think, being out there and looking at the operators and the platforms that have been successful, it's clear you've got to get to a certain scale of product, and for us, we're not looking to become long-term owner occupiers of the assets. We are looking at JV arrangements where we stay into a certain point post practical completion, but that is still really short term to stabilization or a couple of years thereafter. So we're we don't see it as a route that we should be going down. We don't think it would make economic sense. For us, it's partnering up with the best in class operators. So we, for example, use Way of Life at the moment on a scheme that we have at Balfron Tower in East London, 146 build to rent units, and we'll continue to speak to others in the market as well who we think are leading the way and making sure we're partnering with them and obviously taking all their expertise and their lessons to deliver the best outcome for our ultimately our shareholders.
Yeah, very cool building indeed, Balfron Tower. If you're a fan of brutalism, it's
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess that third party management market is going to get very competitive as well. I mean, we've seen some new ones launched recently. There's a bit of M&A in that space, but with the delivery of new projects predicted to fall rapidly, those guys are going to be competing on the same assets a lot. It's going to be an interesting space to watch. Bronwyn, you mentioned earlier that on your site things are moving pretty quickly and the buildings are going up quickly, which obviously helps mitigate rising costs and all the other expenses involved. But are you guys looking at new construction techniques, new construction materials, MMC? What's kind of around the corner in terms of improving the efficiency and the speed of the construction process?
Yeah, I mean, MMC is definitely a kind of key part of our thinking, and we have a kind of strong track record. It's not something kind of new to us. It's something we have been doing longer than most in the UK. I think that Green for Key, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, is kind of one of our best examples of volumetric modular construction. We also use bathroom pods across most of our schemes. So in Bermondsey, we've got bathroom pods, we've got all the MEP cupboards are pods. So I think what actually some people may not be aware of is actually we also exported that thinking back to the US, where MMC just wasn't really being utilised. So and actually that's taken off to the extent that we now have a manufacturing facility in Pennsylvania, which is essentially the backbone of our mid-market housing strategy there. So I think it's definitely an aspiration of the business to kind of go lean in even further to that. But I think the key with making MMC work is that certainty of pipeline. You need that kind of the constant conveyor belt delivery almost. And I think with the current viability challenges, we just don't have that. So I think it's definitely a piece of the puzzle, but there are some other things that we kind of need to solve first to really make that work.
I think the MMC supply chain has been beset with issues, hasn't it? A lot of the companies involved in actually supplying the components have struggled. Bay, is MMC something that you're using a lot? I mean, you've got some huge schemes, so presumably efficiency and process are really important in those.
Yeah, our development team will probably say they've been using MMC for the last 30 years, but they've I think we've gone from like more like unitized facades and bathroom pods. I think our true focus has been really on like energy efficiency and running costs, and obviously the materials that you're putting into the building to assist with that. I think that's another thing of sort of bringing it back to the vertical integration is that our property management, our operations teams are feeding back into our development and construction team to tell us what they want in the next asset, or we use the data to inform us the decision of why something isn't working, and then really change that for the next delivery. So we have this exercise called like doing things better exercise, where we look at each asset we've delivered and all of these components and data points are analysed to look at how we can improve the next asset. So I think we use it to sort of really track the running costs and energy efficiency as a key target within building materials.
Yeah, thanks, Bay. Let's talk a bit about multi-use, multi-tenure schemes, because Greystar, for example, could be a prime candidate for this. A way of retaining your customer across various phases of their lifestyle, perhaps from student accommodation to co-living to build to rent, and maybe even rented later living. Is this something you're looking at, Bronwyn, in terms of new sites, incorporating different tenures and retaining the tenant for longer?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that in theory, blending kind of student co-living, build to rent, potentially even later living on a single site makes a huge amount of sense, because you're catering to residents across different life stages, and you're kind of building that resilience in income stream. But I think it's not something that we actually have done in practice. Most of our I was trying to think. I can't think of a project that we've got at the moment that actually blends build to rent, student co-living. And I think that the main barrier to that at the moment is that you're not only delivering with kind of different planning use classes and how kind of that's viewed. Also, you've got different regulatory frameworks. And also, it's the main barrier is probably different lender appetites, and that each kind of lenders who are looking in one sector don't necessarily want the exposure to the other sectors. So I would say that's probably the biggest barrier to doing that in practice. But I think in theory, it's definitely something that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think Larry Corman in the States is a big fan of this concept. I think he calls them vertical villages. So it's a nice idea, but whether we're ready for it, I'm not sure. Nigel, what are your thoughts on that?
It's more, would people want to live near students? And there's a perception issue with a lot of these. If you were a student and you've just graduated, you might want to move on in life and not be sort of related to the student side. You want to make that next step forward. Yes, it's building boxes, slightly different boxes, but you're essentially just building the same boxes across a site. So you can physically do it, but will the uptake be the same? Managing it is going to be virtually similar. If you've got a couple of maintenance guys walking around fixing a pipe in one, fixing a pipe in another is virtually the same. But I feel there's a perception issue. It may be different in a very dense city, but yeah, it's not without its challenges. And then going back to the other points that others have raised about lenders and planning and regulatory, it all plays into it really.
It's interesting to hear that from a PBSA developer. My perception is that students are far more civilized these days than they were when I was at university.
I did say perception.
Yeah. Okay, Max, how about you? What are your thoughts on mixed use multi-tenure development?
Well, I mean, we're looking at it. We've got a scheme in Poplar called Chris Street Market, where we're looking at a range of uses across what could be 1,800, 2,000 units in totality in a 10, 15-year development plan. I think the guys have hit the nail on the head. For us, it's finding different capital partners for those, and there's clearly a consideration there. I think one of the biggest challenges is the front loading of cost and the impact on viability versus the best way you'd actually like to phase a scheme. So I look at Greenford Quay as a really good example that Bronwyn mentioned. We have a for sale block that we acquired from Greystar and built out ourselves. And we've seen the benefits of being as part of the wider master plan, with Greystar having delivered, I think it's 3 built to rent blocks now, and actually tenants who have lived there and become accustomed to Greenford, then moving and buying one of the apartments. But I think the challenge that you face on the larger master plan is front loading of planning costs, but also front loading of affordable housing, infrastructure costs, whatever it might be, and that forcing you to potentially diverge and bring forward, in theory, what the most viable private tenures are, whether that's built to rent, co-living, PBSA. It's more likely going to be the latter in today's market, and that might not be the best way to deliver the scheme in terms of how you want to build up the scheme, the placemaking, the master plan, etc. So there's opportunities out there, but there's plenty to think about, and we know the complexities of the single phase, single tenure scheme I mentioned earlier. There's obviously a lot more complexities with the larger master plan schemes.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Okay, we're getting towards the end of our hour, so I'm going to give you a magic wand, guys, and I'm going to ask you in turn what would be the single most beneficial thing that government could do to kickstart living sector development, both generally and in your businesses? And if you could wave a magic wand over Whitehall, what would you make them do? Let's stay with you, Max, first.
Well, I think we've got to work out what the art of possible is, right? So if you go back to what the government can and can't control from a revenue side, I think there's not a huge amount that they can do to really drive the revenue position. They can certainly hinder it. You know, we've talked about rent caps and other things previously. And yes, if they brought back something like Help to Buy, there would be stimulus there. So yes, there are some things, but I think from a cost perspective, we've touched on some of the cumulative effects of some of the levies and the gateway process that has come in. We have to find a way to be able to build more efficiently, to reduce your total development costs. And for me, one of the biggest things is the labour market, you know, on the construction side. We've seen a mass exodus of construction workers. I think the latest stats are the average UK construction worker is now aged over 50. We know that it's the single biggest input into your build cost. So I think, you know, you've got to find a way to build productivity. You've got to find a way to bring a new wave of workers, you know, a younger cohort into that market. And whilst you might not have any kind of deflation in build costs, if you can help stabilize it and keep it at a similar level without much inflation moving forward, I think that is probably the biggest single thing they can do to help the viability challenge that we all face.
Do you think a replacement of or a new version of Help to Buy or something similar would actually divert people from the living sector? People who are perhaps happy to rent might think about getting back on the housing ladder. Then I'm kind of sensing a shift in attitudes amongst people who are much more comfortable with renting for longer in their lives. Do you think Help to Buy could be counterproductive for the renters?
I mean, I think the stats are still pretty overwhelming, you know, in terms of demand versus supply. And I think at the moment you read the latest stats coming out of Molio, whoever it might be, on kind of build to rent starts on site, you know, going down quarter on quarter. I don't see it being a hindrance to build to rent, but I do see it being a help to the open market sales sector, and we need more activity in the market. So look, if they come out with something of that ilk, I would look at that as a positive as opposed to a negative.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Nigel, how about you? Wave your magic wand.
Well, when you posed the question, what should we do with Whitehall? I was thinking, oh, I'd never looked at Whitehall as a student block before, but actually there could be a whole new village down there. I think an easy change would be a change in VAT on construction materials, or that's an easy way that could reduce costs. I'm staggered every month as to how much we spend on VAT. I'm doing 2 reclad schemes. One, we're paying VAT on the construction. One, we're not paying VAT on the construction. So that was something they brought in with reclad schemes, was to reduce the VAT down to 0. There's 5% VAT on certain elements as well. So they do it from time to time, but also, if they want to change things, change the gateway process, really speed it up. Yes, let's get the buildings safer. They need to be safer, but it needs to not be a hindrance, really, to the market.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. Bronwyn, how about you?
I think for me, the main pressure at the moment is just this viability stack. So for me, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be making profit not a dirty word in the public sector, you know, in government, because I think that return on risk equation is crucial for attracting capital and actually getting schemes delivered and new homes built. So I think we're seeing it that when that risk return doesn't work, then capital's looking at other things, whether that's standing stock. For us, actually, we're as you kind of mentioned right at the start, we are looking more at a kind of mid-market, low-rise product that kind of doesn't hit some of these issues that we've talked about. So I think if government wants to see more high-rise urban brownfield development come forward, then they need to get that viability process right. So a more certain timeline, a more certain approach to viability and how that's going to be assessed as part of the planning process, and not kind of constantly trying to squeeze that profit margin, because that's how you actually get capital into the sector. That's how you get new homes built.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bronwyn. And Bay, last one for you.
Sorry, just to jump in on Bronwyn's point there about planning, really key. If the planning process can be speeded up, we can get developments going quicker. I was working on a scheme that the planners said it's too tall. They didn't say by how much. They just said it's too tall, and it just stalled the whole process, which time is money at the end of the day. So,
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah, I
Mike.
mean the planning delays is obviously one. I've got probably a long list, but I think if I was to provide one that hasn't been said, it's probably certainty around affordable and sale calculations. I think that the government are finding every way possible to sort of indirectly tax the developer, and as Bronwyn mentioned, the sort of risk for developing out, especially against other markets or other investments, aren't really where they need to be at the moment. So that probably would be one of the key ones that I would look at.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And thank you all for your contributions. I think that was a really interesting discussion. It's tough out there. There's no getting away from it, but we need to, these units need to be delivered, and people like yourselves are out there at the coalface doing it now. How tough it is. So hats off to you. We're going to show a few slides before we wrap up. The next Urban Living webinar is in September, and we are going to take a deep dive into co-living and look at the evolution of that particular sector, which is one I think has got a big role to play in the market future. And you can see the link to register for that one in the chat. If you'd like to work with us at Urban Living News on our digital offer or our in-person events, then please do get in touch with my colleague Sam, whose details you can see on the screen and also in the chat. And finally, just want to say thank you all for watching. Thanks for taking the time out of your days. I hope you've learned something today. Thank you to our fantastic panelists, Bay, Bronwyn, Nigel and Max. I wish you all a good weekend, and I'll see you on another webinar soon. I'll probably see quite a few up at UK Reef next month as well. Take care, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
At IHM, we believe in the power of connection. We exist to inspire, to inform, and to unite decision makers who are shaping the future of hospitality and real estate. Our why is simple. We believe this industry thrives when people and ideas come together. And we're here to make that happen. So how do we do it? We publish 4 leading multimedia brands, each a trusted voice in its sector. We blend intelligent content, curated events, and a strong community into everything we do, making it easy, accessible, and genuinely useful. From online engagement to face-to-face connection, we are known for being insightful, collaborative, and refreshingly human. We host world-class events, panel discussions, podcasts, award ceremonies, and webinars designed to spark ideas, drive conversation, and create impact. With over 62,000 monthly web visitors, 55,000 email subscribers, and 69,000 social media connections. Our reach is deep, and our community is active. We're partnered with the biggest names in hospitality, and we'd love to connect with you. So whether you're looking to grow your visibility, meet the right people, or understand where the market's heading, read, watch, listen, and me. Do it all with IHM.